Now I wanted to continue for this presentation from designing reusable web components. So this is now kind of leveraging how to leverage Vaadin in a large project. So well, here's the outline what I was going to tell. So a little bit of technology. So typical web application or web components these days, they are HTML5 based components which you are building. We use Google Web Toolkit there as tool, but Vaadin framework is more like packaging this stuff into distributable packages. Some of design principles I found along the way building components, what to follow, and I was about to show this, so let's see how this goes, because I came up with the idea in the train while coming here, so not too much preparation, but at least we have a lot of questions after that. All right, so why do you need this kind of reusable web components in the first place? So the world we live in, they are a big project. There are tens of people involved in a single project, and it becomes always hard to manage. So there are people changing files in the source management system and breaking stuff elsewhere, and you can tackle this with testing, with good testing, but then again it's better not to break things all the time, and that's why good component-oriented framework is very handy there. Another dimension to this is competence management. So not everyone has to know how everything works. So you can just rely on the stuff you're given and continue with your own work. In big projects, there are different level of competence and different roles for people. So big integrators, they have good Java developers, but they know nothing about CSS or something like that. So it's very good to have clear roles, separations on the API level, on the kind of tool level already, so you don't step into other toes there and break stuff every time. And component-based framework, you can actually use the object-oriented approach there everywhere, inheriting stuff, extending stuff, extending other functionalities without breaking it along the way. This is not very easy on JavaScript because of lacking typing and language level support. The designers, they are in their own corner doing their stuff. They can do it separately afterwards the application has been built, or before the application has been built. Doesn't matter too much. And packaging, so that everything can be reused. So if there is someone who comes up with a good component, others know how to use it, can use it. It doesn't make any sense to build a component which no one can use. Web technologies. So, well, the HTML5, everybody has heard this. It's HTML. It's brand new. Okay, it introduces a few new features, which actually makes it new and shiny, but not too much new in that sense. So few improvements. I around which are kind of collected together to make it as a single version there. I would say that the most prominent is the canvas. So that's something that people always refer to HTML5. There are other stuff there, lots of other stuff there, but canvas is always the first example for everything. And with that, you can draw lines there. So yes, okay, it's very low level, and it's good if you need a low level access to that. But mostly you need something more high level, so you want to package it differently. There are good tutorials and stuff how to use this stuff. How many have used Canvas in some? No one. Good. Okay. Google Web Toolkit again. So this is on the client side, bringing the Java there. So having the object-oriented approach on the client side. So you can write that client-side code in Java. It's compiled from Java to JavaScript, and it basically takes care of the browser differences there, so you don't have to worry about too much. So abstract the DOM, but it's still very low level. And we need the next level. But anyway, okay. Simpler, as I mentioned, Java. And the tooling is excellent, but I would say that's not because of the cheapability, it's because of the Java language there. There's very good tools in Java. From our point of view, the benefit of Google Web Toolkit is avoiding the spaghetti. We have so much of the client-side code inside the framework that it's unmaintainable. I made the first version of Vaadin client-side in JavaScript. It was 2005 or something like that, and the first prototypes, they worked very well. They were pretty much the same as this day from the communication and speed point of view, but the code was something that no one wanted to extend anymore. So they rewrite it once and they rewrite it twice, and was it third time they decided to go for some other tooling, and that's where the Google Web Toolkit came along in 2007. There was a good question about the asynchronicity and synchronous roles of this. So everything in the JavaScript is asynchronous, and you have to keep that in mind. So when you ask something from the server, you might get the answer from the server when you don't think you get the answer from the server. And it's good when if you are focusing on the low-level application development, but if you want to build those business applications, you don't want to think these kind of things all the time. And do I do this in the right order, or can this happen before this one, and so forth. So I consider that as a weight in high-level applications, but very, of course, on the communication point of view, it's very effective. Vaadin in turn, in this sense, it's more like a packaging framework. It's packaging everything in the single in a single package that you can then reuse. The core is the component. So these are the buttons, tables, trees, which are used there. And they have the Java API. They run in the server. That's a server there. That's how you compose the user interface. You have layouts there. You put them inside each other to build up a bigger user interface and find event listeners there. And then each component has the client side, which they asynchronously communicate with. But so this basically maintains the state from here. The authoritative state in Vaadin, it's on the server side, those components. So if you lose the client side, for example, page refresh, you lose all all the client side. It's reloaded from the server. And but it doesn't matter. If you reload a Vaadin application, everything is there. You don't have to worry about it. This is the low-level client-side stuff, which is on this side. You build a DOM structure, you build a DOM, maybe the CSS, and this we use the Google Web Toolkit for. The nice thing is that you can take these both, so you don't have to worry about whether it goes on the client side or server side. You can take this both and put into the single jar file. And that's what we call the add-on jar file. So these are the Vaadin add-ons. So you can think of it as you have a small client and server which are actually packaging there in the jar file and distributing that. So it's much more powerful than having only the client side or the server side or distributing them in a separate packages. You are always having them in a single box there. And it makes it much more easier to reuse these in different applications. And again, running Vaadin application in different environments. I made a few add-ons for Vaadin in history. So it says 17. I didn't know there were so many. But anyway, now I'm in the trouble of converting them to Vaadin 7. But if anyone wants to help, now it's the time. So there are different, so basically come up with some idea and okay, this sounds good. We don't have this component, we need this for the framework. But I can't get anything to the framework anymore. So the core set of components, it's managed by itself, and the best way to get something done is just to do it and publish it. Some of those have been popular. Anyone know, recognize any of these?
I use Notiq.
Which one?
Notiq and DOM.
Notific. This one?
Yes.
Okay, okay. We come to the naming. I think it depends on the overlays, or was it vice versa? I don't recall. There are very simple ones, collection container, which is a data source for collections and stuff like this. I think this is one of the most popular, so I think it really reflects what kind of applications people are using Vaadin. So building old application, converting them to modern web application, but they still have something they don't want to rewrite, so they will just want to integrate an applet somewhere there. That's fine. Yeah, but from these, some design principles just some random ideas I came up with. So every these components, they were basically coming from the invention that we could do this better. So that's something that's a fundamental there. So you want to have something more than the framework offers there. So it's about the user experience. You want a better user experience. It's usually giving some benefits to some audience with some technology. But as we all know, we typically do this upside down. So we have some technology, who could use this, and what he could do it with. So this is the typical way of doing the components. So I can do this, can I use it somewhere? Would it be useful to someone else? So normally you come from a bottom up other than top down, but you should come from the benefits, what the user actually needs and what are the users, and then find the technology to do that, not the other way around. I pick one of my add-ons here to just for the demo purposes. So this was providing the benefits of showing the application credits. Every application needs to have credits somewhere. So who is the author and which version of the application are you running? So this was the undestructive way of having it here in the corner, and you could then scroll it down and it looks nice there and makes your application looks a little bit nicer. and we wanted to have it we wanted to make it feel good and have animation and themability, you know, so you could change the look and feel of the box completely. Very typical add-on that, okay, I have this CSS technology here, what would I use it for? The other dimension, so your users actually aren't only the users using the component, they are the end users, but your users are, when building components, they are the programmers, they are those who use your API. So actually it's more about the API design. And okay, this is one API design. For the same component, we wrote 2 APIs. The simple one-liner you can have there, just giving the most relevant information, and then more control over the look and feel and the content of the application. But this is where you should actually focus on. So what I did, that I still do, I'm my own user there, so I write the API first, so I write from the top down. So how would I use the component, and then I implement the features. Simple things should be easy. I think even the Java APIs forget this at some point. So some simple things are very complex. So don't optimize for everything, so optimize the simple things. Make them very easy, and then have the control on the side, not mixing these two. Otherwise you have very complex API and no one will be using those. And the abstraction layers. So now when you can do everything on the server side, you can do, and everything on client side, you can have CSS control. You have to kind of design every one of those in a way that people can extend those. They can inherit, they can change something, and so forth. I must say I'm not always been very successful with this, because some of the components are only made for myself, and I'm happy with it already. But one notice along the way: prepare for change, because once you've written something and publish something, people are going to want something different. They don't want what you just wrote there. This simple component, it has a lot of emails coming in. Can I have this? Can I have this? And how simple component can you write without anyone wanting something more there? So this was a box in the corner, so it's still, okay, we need an IE9 support. Okay, I don't have IE9 in my machine, so what can I do? Maybe get help from someone else, but can I have it on left side of screen? I wasn't thinking about this, so you can only have it on top. But people have a lot of ideas. Some of them are very good, and you should listen to those, but what it needs that you have a setup that you can actually embrace the change. You can change your APIs, you can change those. You cannot test every scenario. The IE9 is very good example of that one. I couldn't do that. It's very, I have to ask someone else. So that's basically crowdsourcing the stuff. But I wouldn't know that before I was publishing it. So the publishing is very, very important, and that should be done early and often. But that, you know, knew this already. This is what I use as a guideline for myself. If someone doesn't know how to use it, it's not their fault. You have too complex API or something else. It's not their fault. So you have to simplify it somehow. This applies to the framework also. We are validating the framework APIs constantly, so that they are actually usable and make sense. You know that in Java you can make same thing in multiple ways, millions of ways, and not every one of those is very good. or very understandable, let's say. And sharing and distributing packaging for easy use. I use always demo and documentation together, so demo is the documentation basically. So you have the code there, you can copy paste there. Code is very good documentation. Everything I've done basically is open source, so never done any commercial components in that sense. So I have the open source channels and I use those. So don't forget the marketing. So this was the About Box page there in the Vaadin directory. Almost 5 stars. I find it funny because this is so small components. The source code is here. It's Mark, my colleague of mine, who actually published the source code there. You can find it there. So this is important. The source code is there. You can get the feedback and issues back from somewhere. But yes, I was about to show something. How much do you want to spend time here today? Until the morning. Short version on the long version.
What are the difference?
If I write the code, actually, I've written it here already, but I could delete it first. So and write it again, or I could just go through and explain it. So, which do you prefer?
Just explain.
Just explain. Okay. First in, first served. Okay. So basically, what I came with, I find this nice library called 3JS. Anyone heard of this?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a 3D 3D library.
Using WebGL?
Using WebGL. So it's a web component. I don't have any slides of that. Maybe I have it here. So I think it has been pretty widely used in different presentations to have 3D animations on web pages.
For dummies. For dummies.
For dummies.
This is for us?
So you can see here what you can do it for.
Yeah.
So you can render 3D stuff in the browser. So here are some use cases of 3D stuff in web browser. It's based on the canvas, so it's using the canvas as 3D context there and rendering there. So I found this when I was coming here in the train, so I thought maybe I can create a component out of it. And there are very good ways in Vaadin 7 to create. If you have an existing JavaScript library, you can just take that and use that. So this is the file I picked up there from the website. It's large. It's not readable. And I didn't read it through. So this is minimized JS file, basically implementing the stuff. I picked up the sample that was in the, I think it wasn't this sample which was on the front page, but no, well, it was this one. I picked up this sample and thought that I use it as a basis to start building component. And but as I mentioned, so if you are creating a reusable component, you start with the API. How would your users use it? So this is now a Vaadin application. This is generated by the Eclipse plugin, basically. So it creates a button and adds a click listener, which actually adds some labels there, but I removed that code already. Instead, I wrote there a new tree widget, and I wanted the button to, if it's animating, I wanted to stop. If it wasn't animating, I wanted to start. So I wrote this first. Of course, it didn't even compile, but in Eclipse or in IntelliJ, you have very good refactoring tools. You can add the functions on the fly. So I was adding the function stub here in the tree widget already. So I had the API in place, and my application was actually compiling in the sense. And in Vaadin 7, you have this abstract JavaScript component, which makes it easy just to pick up the JavaScript library and instantiate that on the client side, or load that on the client side. You specify here which files you load, JavaScript file. This is the original file, 3 years minimized, and this is my integration file. So this I needed to write here. But I was coming from top down, so from the API to the component and continuing from there. Then there is a state, as you might remember from the presentation that in Vaadin 7 there is state object, which is you can use to pass information back and forth with the client. So I used that state, I extended, so I created this tree state, which has one public field animate, and it extends the JavaScript component state in Vaadin. Nothing else. By default it's false, and this function is basically just for syntactic. I don't have to do this casting every time I'm using it. So I check if it's animating, checking from the state. If the animate is true, I return that, and I stop it by setting it the same state. This is the server-side component in Vaadin. You don't need to basically write anything else. This component and the state object, which is passed back and forward. That should be easy enough. So now the server side is already made. This compiles, the whole application compiles. I still need the integration, and this is JavaScript, not Java. So actually this was my time spent. So Java is easy, but this became a little bit harder. You can see here this is basically the same code here, but I added some namespacing here. So if you want to create something reusable in JavaScript, you have to be very careful with the namespacing. It becomes extremely interesting if you have functions here introduced and you want the namespace, so you have to have tricks like this. So I'm setting self-named variable to point to this, just to make it scope that the self doesn't change anymore, and because this will change later on. So I don't know if you want to know about it, but this is kind of underlying the fact that you don't have to know everything just to use the component, but you can let someone else to build it and just use the component. Anyway, this I write. So basically, this is the Vaadin integration part here. So we have a callback when the state changes. I check whether the animating is in what point, and I call some JavaScript function here. Start is basically starting the animation callback loop, and stop is just stopping it. And let's see. This should run. It doesn't run in Safari because of the web context, but let's go here. And as you can see, there is a cube. So, okay, nothing too much here. I didn't code further than this from the 3D animations, but because the demo was more about how to package this as a reusable component. So if you go back to the application, so this is what if I'm now using the component, this is what I have to write here. So I'm creating a new tree widget, and I'm calling functions on the tree widget here. Now, very nice, this is a project of mine. If I want someone else to use it, you can export that as a Vaadin add-on package file. And I think I made it somewhere once, so I tested it. So give reasonable implementation version there. You will need to increase that. Export as a jar file. And now you actually have a jar file which is you can upload to Vaadin directory already. It's compatible with the directory. But just skip that at this point and we create a new Vaadin project. This is thread project. Again, using Vaadin 7. So the plugin actually creates you the hello world sample here with the same button click listener. But now I can, where did I put it? Export it. So I had it here. The jar file I just exported from the other project. I could pick this and put here in this test project. And this is an approach I use in testing the stuff, so you make sure that the whole package works. So now, what you can actually do here, well, let's have the button there, but layout, add component, and from the jar file, we have the tree widget. And we can store that in the field. So in here, in button click, we can call the start function like this. So now I just created a new project using the jar file I created in a separate project. I can run this project on Tomcat server. And oh, what was that? I was about to copy this one. So now I'm running the test project here. So it looks very similar, and I have the application here. So what I here made, I made it actually reusable, and I mean from the reusable perspective, if you want to use multiple of these in your project, you can do that. Okay, I'm missing that. Let's create a for loop here. So you can see that so you probably see where I'm heading at. So I'm creating a bunch of these components in the, let's see if this works directly. No, didn't. Oh, okay. I'm not creating anything. Let's restart the server. So run that again. So you can use the same component in the application multiple times and control with the same APIs. If you think of doing this in JavaScript, I assure you will break something along the way. But now, if you take a look at the JavaScript there was, so try to namespace that and keep track on the namespace that you are not breaking anyone else cube component there with some asynchronous callback, which in this case is rendering the stuff. So packaging everything into these jar files makes it easier for the average Java developer to actually use those components in real life applications, which might not be possible otherwise. Now I lost my connection here. Right, but that's for the demo. It was a little bit shorter version without, so we can all go to sleep. And yeah, so this was a recap. I think the most important stuff, be your own user. You are developers, you know how to use the APIs, build that first and do it so. And I skip everything else because find a good name for the components. It matters more than you think. I have had some bad namings and good namings, and it's interesting how much it affects how the component works. So that's for the component reusability. There were good questions about Vaadin and Vaadin bugs and how should I implement this in Vaadin. I don't know if I can answer all of those today, but hopefully we can continue in the forums. I will be busy next week or so to build up the Vaadin 7 launch, so don't expect answers from me, but I will give heads up to the team so they know that there are important questions, and just say hello from me. All right, now if you have simple questions, I can answer those. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the major feature do you want to see in Vaadin 8?
Vaadin 8?
Yes, the next generation of your product.
Interesting.
Yes.
We have been so full of the Vaadin 7 last year, so I haven't been thinking too much Vaadin 8, but I think that the component-oriented approach will somehow, I think that this add-on has been proven very successful, so I'm guessing that it will become more easier and easier. Well, hopefully not until the Vaadin 8, but I would like to see the IDE integrations much better, so it will be more like an integrated in IDE, so hopefully we have good.
For example, what problem do you have with integration with Eclipse?
Eclipse is quite good, but there are lots of good IDEs there, which we are lacking currently. So NetBeans, for example, so it's completely outdated. So that needs to be dragged back to the and the visual designer probably will evolve. That's something that the world is moving into. Even though we know Java, we don't want to write it every time, and simple use cases, it's easier to just do it visually. So I don't know. I have to come up with better answer for this one. This was the first time someone asked from number 8 anything. Usually people are asking, when is the 7 out?
I'm interested in this because I myself work in the company which write not framework but just controls for Microsoft Windows, and they get a simple answer. For example, the Microsoft Office, new Microsoft Office is coming up, and they write the same UI interface, and which users can use in their application. So in your situation, that's much more complicated because there are a lot of separate ways in which your framework may groove.
Okay.
So sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So there are lots of, but I think that our approach has been kind of serving those Java developers who don't want to learn about the web technologies too much, and the web technologies are not getting any easier. So I think that there is a place for this kind of abstraction in the future. As I mentioned, we already started in 2000 or 2002 was the first version of out, and it was page. But the interesting thing was that the APIs were pretty much the same. So you had a button and you have a label and so forth. Yeah, it doesn't have to change too much there. And looking back, I'm a little bit surprised that it's 2013 and we are still using the same button API. So world is moving pretty slowly in those fields. I think that there will be new languages. Java is probably evolving, and we are seeing this also. But fundamentally, the abstractions will kind of get bigger and bigger. People want to do higher level stuff, and I think that's what we see. And we are already seeing it in those components. I don't know what the client technology in 10 years will be, but I'm pretty sure that we can support it. So.
One more question.
Yeah.
So there are several concurrent libraries.
Yeah.
And so what are the main benefits of your library?
I would say that it's the development simplicity is the key. I don't know, are you talking about...
for example, smart
GDVT, yeah. So, yeah, you're right. So the Google Web Toolkit-based component libraries, they basically add more components to Google Web Toolkit, because those who have used, not many of you had, but Google Web Toolkit, the components in that framework, they are not quite there. There are extensions to Google Web Toolkit to add good components there. But we come from the different point of view. So we are actually using the Google Web Toolkit only as a part of the framework. So we have the server-side APIs. What you see here, what I was programming with, it's the server-side APIs. And if you think of it, it's a completely different idea. A smart GVT, they run on the client side. So anything you write even though you write it in Java, it will be running on the client side in the browser as JavaScript. And you saw there one JavaScript file. You couldn't read it, but I'm sure there are people who can read it. So it's a security thing. So you don't want to publish everything on the client side. If you build Google Web Toolkit application alone, you must make sure that you know what you're doing there, because you are actually showing the code to the users. And we had some presentations about actually hacking into Google Web Toolkit code. It's obfuscated, but you can still find out the A and B functions there and find out how it works. So, for example, validation and business logic, they have to always be on the server side anyway, just to be safe. So in Vaadin, the approach is different. You program mostly on the server side, and you use these components which only present the data. And all the validations, all the data binding, it's on the server side here, so you can't manipulate that as a user. it's a little bit safer approach. Of course, you can mess that up too, but at least it's a safer choice. And for example, we have a lot of clients in banking sector and insurance sector because of this, because it's a safer environment. You know, but you have to balance, because you have more control on the client side, but then again, you have to know that someone can read this code, someone can change this code when running it. So no business critical stuff there, please.
And does the 7 version have a backward compatibility with this installation?
Mostly. I think that we have had very extreme backward compatibility. So I made a prototype conversion of Vaadin application implemented, or it was not called Vaadin back then, but it was HTML Toolkit application built in 2004 and converted that to Vaadin. And I made it in 4 hours. So it was very compatible, backward compatible. It's not that backward compatible anymore, but it's for the reason that we wanted to get rid of the old stuff there. So the backward compatibility is breaked only on those occasions that it's easier to do it the new way. So I would say 90% of the code is backward compatible, at least.
Okay, then the next question. I know that Vaadin is integrated in Liferay portal.
It's integrated,
Yes.
yeah.
And so how soon it will be available the next 7 version?
In Liferay, yeah. So maybe the approach with actually there is another company who probably wants to take care of the Liferay integration in the future in the control panel which is running there, but the approach will probably change in that sense that you can update it on the fly. So currently it has come with the Liferay, and it's very old version already, which comes with the Liferay, and it's not good. We are releasing. We have a schedule of maintenance release on every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks it's getting old release already. So we want to make it easier to update it there. So that's how it's going to be in the future. It requires some tooling in the Liferay portal, the control panel basically. And I think that will be updated through the marketplace. I don't know if you know the Liferay marketplace, so it will be through that later on. You had some questions about backward compatibility or something?
Yeah, probably you provide some tool for conversion from 6 version to 7.
Let's see how it goes. We have now a couple of migration guides how to do that, and they are quite short, so they're quite intuitive.
What
And
about to optimize this?
actually,
To provide the tool that helps you to convert it automatically.
let's see if there is some things that can be kind of automated. Mostly the changes are like the windowing stuff you saw there. So some features that require the long code blocks to implement is now a few lines. You can easily spot those and kind of replace those in the IDE. That's not too much, and typically applications has, I don't know, 5 windows or so. It's not too much of work. But if you think of the forms, for example, in those I think there might be some tools which automatically go through the fields and convert those. But currently I don't think that there are such tools in which you could use. But let's see. If there is a case, I think we can do that.
For example, you may implement some replacements in ID plugins, like
yeah, right. So probably they will be part of the ID plugin anyway. So, or Maven plugins or something like that. So to convert.
just to allow people to do it step by step.
Yeah, the conversion, yeah. But as I mentioned, it might not be that much either anyway, so finding the tool might be a bigger job than running it, running the changes on hand. So let's see.
So okay, guys, the last question.
Last question. Okay, this must be a big one.
No? Okay. Okay.
Maybe it's kind of performance question.
Okay.
So a little bit strange, but where to expect bottleneck at first when using Vaadin? For example, you wrote the application on Vaadin as a startup, and you have an big info of your users. So as I read about Vaadin, it has pretty big sessions per user. Is this a bottleneck, or you can some more big bottleneck early?
Bottleneck. Well, there are. This is a big question. We can talk more later, but quickly to say, okay, there is the two scalability things. The session size, which is basically the server memory, and Vaadin itself, the components you saw there, the label, the button itself, they are not too big. They are instances of Java classes, and they are very small. What is easy in Vaadin, you can easily bind a lot of data to those components. And for example, a gigabyte of data into the table, and okay, I've seen megabytes or hundreds of megabytes bound to the data, and if you don't release that, it will stay there in the session cached, and that's maybe the problem. So it's too easy to kind of pull up too much data to the UI components. The components itself, they are not too big. You don't have a couple of kilobytes of session sizes if you remove the data from there, but the data might get big. So you have to be careful in releasing and binding that. But that's premature optimization. Don't do that up front. You can do that later. So there are ways to do that. Other scalability thing is of course the chattiness of Vaadin applications, because we run everything on the server side. So if you click a button, it goes to the server and runs it there. I haven't seen that actually being a problem, but I wouldn't build a new Facebook with Vaadin because of this, because you will have a lot of communication back and forth. It will come easier in the future. You can use the push engines or comet style of communication, which actually opens up a socket, WebSocket between the client and server. So then it's much more faster or lightweight from the communication.
So I can tweak Vaadin application to handle lost connection.
To handle lost connection.
And connections and queries.
Yeah, you can. For example, in TouchKit, Vaadin TouchKit, which is the mobile environment or the extension for Vaadin, there is built-in mechanism. You can actually see whether we are online or offline and work based on that. So you can have a partly offline applications. You can see the source code in the mobile application so easily. Well, okay, of course, always when coding on the clients, are keeping in mind that remember that it can be read, the code can be manipulated. So no. If you do validation there, do double validation on the server side.
Okay, guys, let's finish the official part of our meeting.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.